The most self-defeating aspect of the Trump administration's decision to target Canadian technology regulations became clear within just 90 minutes of the announcement. This was not a slow-moving political controversy, it was an immediate corporate revolt. Three of the most powerful and influential technology lobbying organizations in Washington, the Computer and Communications Industry Association, CCIA, the Information Technology Industry Council, ITI, and TechNet, immediately mobilized. These groups, which represent the interests of giants like Google, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft, did not spend the morning praising the president for defending American interests. Instead, they urgently contacted the White House, the U.S. Trade Representative USTR, and key congressional offices with a unanimous and blunt message. The administration's aggressive use of the Section 301 investigation was making the situation for American companies measurably worse, not better. The industry's reaction was driven by a cold, hard calculation of profit and risk. The lobbying groups pointed out that the administration had essentially poked a hornet's nest without a plan to protect the industry from the sting. By formally declaring Canada's digital laws as illegal trade barriers, the White House triggered a Canadian counter-response, specifically the $4.2 billion review of government cloud contracts that placed stable recurring American revenue in active jeopardy. The industry was not asking Canada to back down, they were asking the Trump administration to reconsider its tactics. They argued that the Section 301 instrument was a blunt force tool, being used in a highly integrated and delicate technology relationship where precision was required. In their view, the president had set fire to the House to fix a leaky faucet, and the resulting blaze was now consuming billions of dollars in American company value. This situation created a unique and highly effective political dynamic that the White House clearly failed to model. In traditional trade disputes involving sectors like steel, aluminum, or agriculture, it often takes months or even years for domestic industry opposition to organize and exert pressure on the government. The technology sector, however, is built for speed. It possesses a sophisticated lobbying infrastructure that can deliver a consistent, data-backed message to every relevant decision-maker in Washington in real time. Because tech companies employ workers in every single congressional district and fund political campaigns across the entire country, their pushback carries an immense amount of institutional weight. By the afternoon of April 28th, the very industry the president claimed to be protecting had publicly signaled that his brand of protection was actually a massive financial liability. This rapid backlash echoes the lessons of 2018, when the first Trump administration tried to restrict Chinese technology companies from the American market. Back then, the administration was forced to modify, delay, and in some cases reverse its decisions, because American semiconductor companies, which depended on those same Chinese supply chains, warned that the restrictions were harming American competitiveness. The 2026 tech confrontation has followed an even faster version of that same script. The American technology sector is uniquely capable of generating rapid, coordinated, and politically sophisticated opposition, because it understands that in the digital age, trade barriers don't just stop them, they break us. The industry essentially told the White House that the America First strategy in the tech domain was actually putting America last by handing multi-billion-dollar opportunities to foreign competitors. The result of this industry backlash was a total collapse of the administration's policy logic before the day was even over. When the most successful companies in the history of the United States tell the president that his trade policy is a threat to their business, the political leverage the administration hoped to gain over Canada disappears. The Trump team had planned to use the Section 301 investigation to force Canada to give in, but instead they found themselves fighting a two-front war, one against the Canadian government in Ottawa and a much more dangerous one against their own corporate base in Washington. This misalignment between the government's trade goals and the industry's economic reality has turned the technology confrontation into the most strategically self-defeating action the administration has taken in the entire 5-month trade war. By 12:09 p.m., on April 28th, the digital trade war reached its most volatile moment when Donald Trump escalated the conflict once again via a Truth Social post. In a move that signaled a total breakdown in diplomatic language, the president characterized Canada's review of $4.2 billion in American cloud contracts as economic terrorism directed at American technology workers. He then issued his most aggressive threat to date, He promised to restrict Canadian citizens from accessing American social media platforms entirely if Ottawa did not immediately suspend its digital sovereignty framework. This threat was a massive gamble, as it moved the dispute from the world of business contracts and taxes into the daily lives of millions of people. The administration's logic was that the fear of losing access to platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube would cause the Canadian public to turn against Prime Minister Mark Carney. However, this gamble backfired almost instantly, triggering an unprecedented and highly public revolt from the very companies Trump claimed to be championing. Within 2 hours of the president's post, Meta, Google, and Apple, three of the most powerful entities in the global economy, took the extraordinary step of issuing formal, public statements that essentially told the president no. These corporations did not use the usual back-channel lobbying methods. They spoke directly to the public to explain why the president's threat was both dangerous and impossible to implement. The companies argued that restricting platform access based on a user's nationality is operationally impossible for them to manage on a unilateral executive instruction. They explained that their systems are not built to act as tools of border enforcement, and that any attempt to geofence an entire allied nation would result in catastrophic technical failures across their global networks. By defying the White House so openly and so quickly, these companies fundamentally shifted the power dynamic of the confrontation, showing the world that the president did not have the cooperation of the American tech industry. The legal and constitutional arguments raised by the tech giants were even more damaging to the administration's position. Meta, Google, and Apple argued that a presidential order to block platform access would violate First Amendment principles, which protect the right of private companies to make their own editorial and access decisions. They further stated that such an action would contradict long-standing American telecommunications laws that promote an open internet. Most pointedly, the companies noted that government-directed restriction of platform access is a characteristic of authoritarian regimes, not a behavior that should be exhibited by a leading democratic nation like the United States. This was a devastating blow to the administration's moral and legal standing, as it framed the president's trade tactics as un-American and legally indefensible. The discomfort with Trump's escalation was not limited to the tech industry or the political opposition. It reached deep into the Republican Party as well. Senator Ted Cruz, who chairs the Senate Commerce Committee and is often a vocal critic of foreign tech regulations, issued a statement that conspicuously declined to support the president's threat. Cruz noted that the idea of restricting social media access by nationality raises serious constitutional concerns, and signaled that his committee would need to conduct an extensive examination of such a move before it could be considered a legitimate trade instrument. When a senior Republican committee chairman refuses to endorse a Republican president's trade response on the same day the threat is made, it is a clear sign that the administration has lost the political room to move. Cruz's public hesitation showed that the White House had overplayed its hand and was now facing a potential legislative blockade from its own party. This collapse of support has created what analysts are calling a defender alignment problem for the White House. In previous trade disputes, the administration could usually rely on the affected American industries to support aggressive actions taken on their behalf. In this case, however, Canada's counteroffensive has ensured that the costs of the investigation are being felt immediately by American companies, rather than by the Canadian government. The administration is now effectively trapped. Every time it escalates the threat against Canada, it only increases the opposition and public defiance from the American technology sector and its political allies. Canada's strategy has successfully neutralized the president's leverage by making the weapon of trade retaliation more painful for the person firing it than for the target. With no clean exit path and a policy logic that has completely fallen apart, the White House is now facing a strategic defeat in the very domain where it expected to find its greatest victory.